Wars fans in here. I am not a science teacher, and I teach language arts, and I probably have more attention deficit than any of my students. I like to be entertained, I like for things to be interesting, I like for things to be fun, but I love to learn. And so when we talked about needing to move from 70% literature to 70% nonfiction, that was a pretty big change for me. As a literature major, I had all these fabulous lessons on symbolism and alliteration and poetry and all kinds of things that are really good. But I didn't have as many things for nonfiction, which turns out is where we need our focus to be. So in my mind, I was equating some of that with dull or ho-hum. So I decided to start incorporating some of the literature with the nonfiction and then try to jazz it up a little bit. So this is an actual lesson that I used to build a fire, and I'm going to show you what I did for that, but then also show you how you could use it for any subject area, any classroom, any grade level, and actually make that prior knowledge and that real world relevance kind of solidify those lessons. So the first thing I would have done when people walk in the classroom is I would have had them take a grouping card. And I have different cards and they can group them in several ways. And I would have chosen for them to be grouped in groups of 3 because I wanted, or 4, depends on how many people I had in class. For this particular lesson, I wanted someone to be the resource manager, I wanted someone to be the scribe, someone to be a presenter, and then someone to be the guinea pig, okay? But in actual class, that's what I would do in here, but in actual class, I had every student participate. So we had a lot of data. Every student did this experiment. But I'm running out of ice. Last class was a bit of an ice hog, so I'll show you. And they also didn't return all the papers. So I'm going to show you what I had, and we'll go from there. The short story to build a fire, I have a few excerpts, so I'm going to put these at a couple of tables because you'll need these. I don't have a lot left over. I think they took all the other ones, maybe. So as we're reading to build a fire, this is a fictional piece. It's To Build a Fire, and it's by Jack London. And if you're not familiar with the story, it's the protagonist is, the setting is in Yukon Territory, and he's setting out, and he talks about the setting, and he's talking about how cold it is. It's extremely cold, and it's dark and gray, and it's just all about the setting, and he just repeats over and over how cold it is. As you go through, he talks about, well, he knew when it was 50 below, certain things would happen. And then when it was 75 below, certain things would happen. So as we're reading this, invariably, students will say, well, I wouldn't have done that. I would have done it better. I could have. And they always think that they could have overcome things. So what I do with this lesson now is I have an excerpt about cold-related illnesses and diseases and problems. So it talks about frostbite, it talks about hypothermia. So we actually read the story to build a fire, and then I let them ask questions about it. And I would show you that, but I think it's gone.
Is it gone?
It probably is. It's all right. They'll get it.
Here's one right here.
Oh, thank you. Here's an example. Perfect.
Thank you.
So on the smartboard, I have this nonfiction piece. And we actually talk about how to read nonfiction because it's different. It has different skill sets. And so as they're reading this, I tell them, I say, you're going to need to do some really close reading because we're going to see if the protagonist actually suffered from hypothermia. Was he just unlucky? Were there forces that were working against him? Could you have done better? And so we take some sticky notes, and they look at the actual examples and things. So and I think that's a real life skill too, because we have so many kids who go hunting and who go boating and who do things outside, and they need to be aware of the dangers of hypothermia just for a personal safety issue. So when it's talking about detecting hypothermia, it talks about uncontrollable fits of shivering, vague, slow, slurred speech, memory lapses, incoherence, immobile, fumbling hands, frequent stumbling, drowsiness, and apparent exhaustion. And it talks more about that. It also talks about hypothermia in water. And there are a lot of graphics involved in this that they are looking at and interpreting. And then they take their sticky notes and mark down some things that they think are important that they remembered from the story. At that point, we have a little bit of fun. The first thing we're going to do is everybody in your group is going to, one person from each table is going to come over here and get a bucket. In each of the buckets, we have the same amount of manipulatives. There are some marbles, there's some checkers, there's some chess pieces. There are different types of things in the bucket, and the same number of things, so that everybody who does this has the same kind of variables to work with. So one person from each table, please come up and get a bucket, and then I'll tell you what else to do. Well, there was supposed to be the same amount.
Well, no, I think somebody just threw them in there.
Yep. Hold on.
How many do we want to put in here?
5 marbles in each.